Welcome. Today we're doing a deep dive into Acts chapter 14.
Yeah, this chapter really throws us into the middle of Paul and Barnabas's first big missionary trip.
It does. And it's intense. The energy, the shifts in how people react to them, it's pretty dramatic.
Absolutely. 1 minute they're welcome, the next, well, not so much. Sometimes worse.
Exactly. We're talking acceptance, then people trying to worship them, then suddenly violence, stoning even. It's all packed in here.
A real roller coaster.
So our goal today is to kind of unpack these key events, figure out the message they were trying to get across.
And maybe see what it tells us about, spreading an idea, especially a challenging one, in a world that's, well, complicated.
And volatile, like you said. So it starts in Iconium.
Right. They arrive, and as usual, head for the synagogue. That's their pattern.
And boom, success right off the bat. The text says they spoke so effectively that loads of people believed, Jews and Gentiles.
The great number, yeah. Which is fantastic, but
There's always a but, isn't there?
seems like it. Almost immediately, some of the Jews who didn't believe started stirring things up.
How? What did they do?
The text says they poisoned the minds of the Gentiles against Paul and Barnabas. It sounds pretty deliberate. Active manipulation.
Okay, so hostility is brewing. Do they leave?
No, interestingly, they stay. It says they spent considerable time there.
That's bold. Why stay when it's getting nasty?
Well, they felt called to speak boldly, and significantly, the Lord was backing them up
How so?
with miraculous signs and wonders, confirming their message, which probably convinced some.
But maybe inflamed others, made the opposition even stronger.
Exactly, and the result was stark. The city became divided, literally split down the middle, some with the Jews, some with the apostles.
That sounds unstable.
It was
Right.
dangerous. That kind of polarization, it often leads to something worse.
And it did.
Yep, a plot.
Yeah.
Gentiles, Jews, their leaders, they all got together with a plan to mistreat Paul and Barnabas and ultimately to stone them.
Whoa. So actual violence was planned.
But thankfully, Paul and Barnabas got wind of it.
They found out.
Yeah, they discovered the plot.
Yeah.
And wisely, they fled
Okay, so they escaped. Where did they go?
to Lystra and Derbe, cities in Lycaonia. But they didn't stop their work, just changed locations.
Right. The mission continues. They start preaching the good news there, too.
Exactly. And Lystra is where things get really, really strange.
Okay, tell me about Lystra. What happens?
Well, there's a man there, crippled from birth, never walked.
Okay.
Paul sees him in the crowd, listening. And Paul perceives something in him. Faith. Faith to be healed.
So Paul just calls out to him.
Loudly. Stand up on your feet. The man jumps up, starts walking. Just like that. A public, undeniable miracle.
Wow. Okay, so the crowd sees this. How do they react? I mean, after Iconium, you'd expect maybe division again.
You'd think. But no, this time the reaction is completely different. And completely wrong.
Wrong how?
They start shouting, but in their own Lycaonian language.
What are they shouting?
Essentially. The gods have come down to us in human form.
Wait, what? They think Paul and Barnabas are gods.
Yep. They saw the miracle and interpreted it through their own pagan worldview.
So, who did they think they were?
Well, they saw Paul doing most of the talking, so they figured he must be Hermes, the messenger god.
Okay.
And Barnabas, maybe quieter or more imposing, they decided he must be Zeus, the chief god.
Zeus and Hermes walking around Lystra.
In their minds, yes. And it gets even crazier.
Oh.
The local priest of Zeus, he hears about this.
Oh, boy.
And he thinks, the gods are here, we have to honor them. So he brings bowls and wreaths to the city gates.
Bulls and wreaths? For what?
To offer sacrifices to Paul and Barnabas.
They're about to be worshipped as Zeus and Hermes. This is wild.
Isn't it? Talk about a rapid shift. Fleeing, stoning 1 minute, facing worship the next. How do you even handle that?
So what do Paul and Barnabas do? They can't just accept this.
Absolutely not. Their reaction is immediate and pretty dramatic. They tear their
What
clothes.
sign of horror, right? Or grief.
Exactly. Deep distress. And they rush out into the crowd,
Trying to stop it.
desperately, shouting, "Men, why are you doing this? We too are only men, human like you."
Making it crystal clear. We are not gods.
Right. And then they try to pivot, use the moment.
How?
They try to turn the crowd's attention away from what they call worthless things, presumably the idols, the idea of Zeus and Hermes.
Towards the actual God.
Yes, towards the living God who made heaven and earth and sea and everything in them. They're pointing to the Creator.
Do they try to connect it to the crowd's own experience?
They do. They mention that God, let nations go their own way in the past.
Yeah.
But He didn't leave himself without a witness,
Mm.
without
What
testimony.
kind of testimony?
His kindness, the rain, the crops, the food, the joy in their hearts. Basically, look at the good things in nature and life that's God showing his character.
So, a clear message. We're human, worship the Creator God, look at his goodness in the world. Does it work? Do they stop the sacrifice?
They do stop the sacrifice, but the text adds an interesting note.
What's that?
Even with all this shouting and explaining, they still had difficulty stopping them. That initial culturally ingrained reaction was really strong.
Wow. Okay, so they narrowly avoided being worshipped. Things calmed down a bit.
You'd hope so, but remember the volatility. It snaps back fast.
What happens now?
Remember the opposition from before, from Antioch and Iconium.
The ones who stirred up trouble and plotted to stone them.
Some of those Jews show up in Lystra. They traveled quite a distance to follow them.
And they start talking to the crowd.
Yeah, and listen to this. They won the crowd over.
Won them over. The same crowd that wanted to worship Paul and Barnabas like an hour ago?
The very same. It shows how easily swayed the crowd was, maybe, or how effective the opponents were, but the perception flips completely.
And the result of this flip, don't tell me.
It's brutal. They stone Paul.
They actually stone him after wanting to worship him.
Yes. Drag him outside the city and leave him for dead.
Left for dead. That's just staggering. The contrast.
It really is.
Yeah.
Worship to attempted murder in maybe a day or even hours.
But is he dead?
They thought he was. But as the disciples gather around him,
Yes.
he gets up.
He just gets up after being stoned.
He gets up and goes back into the city.
Back into the city that just stoned him.
Unbelievable courage, right? Or conviction. Or both.
Absolutely. What then? Surely he needs to recover.
You'd think. But the next day, he and Barnabas leave for Derbe.
The next day. Wow. No downtime mentioned.
Straight back to the mission. They preach in Derbe, make a large number of disciples there too.
So more success. But they don't just keep going forward, do they?
No, this is really important. They actually turn around, they retrace their steps.
Back through Lystra, where Paul was stoned.
Yep. Lystra, Iconium, Antioch. The places where they faced all that trouble.
Why go back? That seems incredibly risky.
It probably was. But their purpose wasn't just outreach anymore. It was about building up the believers they'd already made.
Okay. Follow up.
Exactly. The text says they were strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith. Consolidation, you could say.
And did they give them any specific message? Like, it's all smooth sailing from here.
Quite the opposite, actually. They were very direct.
What did they say?
Basically, we must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God.
Wow. Setting realistic expectations. No sugarcoating.
Not at all. And they didn't just encourage them with words. They took practical steps.
Like what?
They appointed elders, leaders, in each church from the local believers.
So setting up local leadership for sustainability.
Right. And they committed these new churches to the Lord with prayer and fasting, giving them a spiritual foundation and structure.
Okay, so they strengthen, organize, and then head home.
Pretty much. They travel back through the regions Pisidia, Pamphylia, preach a bit more in Perga, down to Italia on the coast.
And from Italia?
They sail back to Antioch in Syria. That's where their journey began, where the church had sent them out with God's grace for this specific work.
So back to base camp. What's the first thing they do?
They gather the church, the whole community.
To report back, I assume?
Exactly. And what did they report? Not just their own adventures, but all that God had done through them.
Giving the credit to God.
Yes. And specifically highlighting how God had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. That was a key outcome.
A major theme of this whole journey, really.
Definitely. And after all that, the travel, the drama, the persecution, the establishing of churches, they stayed there a long time with the disciples.
Okay.
A period of rest, reporting, and probably processing everything that happened.
Makes sense. They needed it. So looking back at this whole chapter, this deep dive, what are the big takeaways?
Well, first, just the sheer unpredictability of it all, right? How people react to a challenging message. Belief, worship, violence. It can swing wildly.
Yeah, you really see that in Lystra especially. It also screams resilience, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Facing that level of opposition, the stoning, and getting back up, going back into the city, continuing the mission, that takes incredible strength and commitment.
And the importance of staying clear on the message, that moment where they refuse worship.
Crucial. Distinguishing themselves, the human messengers, from the divine message. putting away from themselves towards God.
It also seems vital that they didn't just, plant a flag and move on. They went back.
Right. That follow-up work, strengthening believers, setting up leaders, encouraging them through hardship, that's essential for anything lasting to be built.
Yeah, it's not just about the initial splash, but the long-term community.
And of course, that recurring theme, the door opening to the Gentiles, the message spreading beyond its original cultural boundaries.
So for you listening, think about this story. This mix of reception, hardship, incredible resilience, and building community. How does that resonate with challenges or goals in your own life?
Yeah, how do you stay focused? How do you keep going when reactions are unpredictable, maybe even hostile? How do you maintain clarity about what truly matters?
And maybe think about that extreme contrast in Lystra. Worshipped as gods one moment, stoned and left for dead the next.
It's such a stark picture. What does that tell us about maybe human nature, how we react to things that challenge us or feel transformative?
Does it make you think about where you focus? On the shifting opinions of the crowd, or on something more constant, like the core mission or message itself? Something to mull over.